Welcome to the video. This is the latest in a long snail-paced review of the best albums from 1972 onwards for each year. And this is about my life and how music was so important and how I have come to select what I think are the 20 best albums of each year. So, 1978, busy year for gigs. I've managed to dig out some tickets for some of the bands that I saw and artists I saw that year. In February, after seeing this guy support Supertramp in 1977 at Newcastle City Hall, he came back with a band, and that's Chris de Burgh. I have to say, it was before the Lady in Red and all that sort of stuff, so it was pretty good. Then in March, uh, Gordon Giltrap, which is the guitarist, very good. April, Manfred Mann's Earth Band, um, saw them 4 or 5 times. Also in April, Blue Oyster Cult. This is the tour they did with the Big Laser show. Can't remember the music, but the show was good. 1st of May, the day after, was Sad Cafe. Black Rose, Every Day Hurts, I think it is. And then just 3 days later, UK with John Wetton, Bill Bruford in the band. Great. And then normally what would happen in the summer, there wouldn't be so many gigs, but I did 2 festivals. I did the Knebworth Festival in June, more of that a little bit later, and I did the Knebworth Festival again in early September. And just let me just show some of the bands. I made a list of the bands who appeared in June. It was headlined by Genesis. No surprise, that's why I went. Jefferson Starship. No Grace Slick though. I think she had a few too many or something, and she was sent back from Germany back to the United States, and she didn't show up on that gig. Fantastic performance by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Devo. They were pelted with beer cans and bottles, but I thought they were great. Brand X opened the whole proceedings, but without Phil. We're all hoping for Phil Collins to spend a couple of tracks behind the drum kit, but no, he didn't. He didn't appear. He just came on with Genesis later. And then in the September, a more edgier lineup. Headliners. I think it was on the 9th of September. Were the Tubes. Next, just preceding them was Frank Zappa. I can't remember a thing about Frank Zappa. Can't believe that I actually saw Frank Zappa live, and I can't remember a thing. Never mind. Peter Gabriel as a solo artist and his band. Dave Edmunds and Rockpile, who had Nick Lowe in the band. Wilco Johnson, ex Dr. Feelgood, he was performing with his Solid Senders. And the opening band of the day were the Boomtown Rats. So yeah, so that was early September. Later on in September, back to Newcastle. Camel. Renaissance. Danny Haslam. Brand X again. This time with Peter Hamill in support. The brilliant Peter Hamill. Spoke to him after his set, and he signed a copy of his Killers, Angels, Refugees book for me. Tom Robinson later again in September. My God, another one in September. Bartley James Harvest. This is the second or third or fourth time I'd seen them. Gordon Giltrap was back again, so I saw Gordon Giltrap. Devo at Newcastle City Hall, and Lindisfarne Christmas, one of the Christmas gigs they did in December, which became a bit of an institution. So anyway, it was a really busy year for gigs. Also, before Lindisfarne, I saw the Clash at Newcastle Polytechnic, which is now called Northumbria University, I think on the 2nd of December with the Slits in support. And they were touring the second album, Give 'Em Enough Rope, and they were absolutely amazing. But of course, the Clash were an amazing live band. So anyway, my favorite albums of 1978. These are some of the ones that didn't make my top 20, but are worthy of mention. So just kind of trying to head off some of the comment section and said, why didn't you include these albums? But these were left out, but only just. Joe Walsh, but seriously, folks, and that's got Life's Been Good on it, of course. 78 album by Muddy Waters, I'm Ready, which has got Hoochie Coochie Man, Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, and of course I'm Ready. A really good album. Johnny Winter plays guitar as well. UK, the debut album. So there we have it. John Wetton, Eddie Jobson, Alan Holdsworth, of course, and Bill Bruford. Very good band. Bartlett James Harvest 12. Good album. Their last decent album, in my judgment, before they disappeared, as far as I'm concerned. And then, of course, Blondie's Parallel Lines. Just missed out on my top 20, but superb album. Funkadelic, One Nation Under a Groove, and this has got the 7-inch single in here as well, which has got Maggot Brain and lunchtime lunch metaphobia. I think it ain't illegal yet. Lunchtime metaphobia. That could have been written in 2024, but there you go. Yeah, fine album. Just listened to that again yesterday. Really good, brilliant guitar work. Lindisfarne, Back and Forth, and this is really just for Run for Home, which is a bit of an anthem for us exiled Geordies. Steve Hackett's second solo album, which is Please Don't Touch, an eclectic mix. A real problem for Steve Hackett is in my judgment. He incorporates too many styles in his albums. But this has got Randy Crawford, before she was famous, singing Hoping Love Will Last, and it's a beautiful performance. Yeah, it's a good album, but again, didn't make my top 20. And again, just missing out was Hermit of Mink Hollow by Todd Rundgren, which has got All the Children Sing, Can We Still Be Friends? Wonderful album. So, what made my top 20? Well, as I've just been talking about, I did a lot of gigs in 1978. Still working in various administration roles in Newcastle for the Tyne and Wear Transport Executive, which was the publicly owned transport organisation. I worked there for about 5 years, I think, before I finally left. More of that later, I guess. But, off the leash, old enough to go to gigs, old enough to go to nightclubs, and really just living the life, really, as a single young lad with money in my pocket from my job. Really enjoyed working for that organization and had so much fun. Music fans around me all the time. So, my number 20 in my rundown, and that is A Tonic for the Troops by the Boomtown Rats. These days, everybody thinks Bob Geldof, the lead singer, is a bit of an ass, since he's become a major financial investor rather than rock star frontman. But I'm sure he's still got it. He was full of charisma in these days. Really, really good. This has got Rat Trap, of course, which was the #1 single. Yeah, good album of its time, of course. Punky, new wave, not really punk, but there you go. Number 19 is the second solo album, Peter Gabriel 2. And this is produced by Robert Fripp, and it's got a kind of a thinner sound. It hasn't got much of a bottom end, and given that Peter Gabriel really loves rhythm, it kind of lacks rhythm, this album. It's kind of electronica, it's experimental, it's interesting. But it's not his best album, but worth having. It was an important album at the time, and at this particular time, every time Genesis or their various members released solo albums, I bought them on the first day of release, and I've still got the copies of all of them to this very day. This is a reissue on Classic Records or something, I think. This is still the 33 single album, but gatefold. And in case anybody thinks it's called Scratch, there's a clue. It's called Peter Gabriel 2. Don't know why they called it Scratch. Some marketing crap from the States record company or something. Right, number 18. Here, My Dear by Marvin Gaye. This is a double album. It's his contractual obligation album. I think it was part of his divorce settlement, and the whole thing is about the pain and a breakdown, and uh, there's a bit of sadness and bitterness, and Marvin Gaye, soul icon, of course, but it seems to be that he gives a lot of himself in this particular album. It's very personal, but it's wonderful. It's a really, really good album. Sounds superb. Um, it's obviously not as good as What's Going On or Let's Get It On, but for a double album, it is not dull at all. It holds up over two discs. Really good album. Seek it out if you're interested in Marvin Gaye. It's not one of his most popular, but it's a really good album. Right, number 17, the second album I bought by this artist, um, and I'll be honest. The only reason why I bought it is because Bruce Springsteen actually does a little bit of a monologue towards the end of the title track, and that's Street Hustle by Lou Reed. Um, this is a great album. This is Lou Reed, the poet. If if you just brought up on Lou Reed with Walk on the Wild Side and Perfect Day, I did a video on Lou Reed some time ago, where it was a bit of a discovery for me because I really did a deep dive into who he was and his poetry and his lyrics. This guy was really a real true artist, and behind that rock star antagonistic facade, that persona that he had, um, as far as I can tell, he had deep feelings for people in the kind of underground scene in New York, people who are struggling on on the edge of desperation, as it were. But this is a really really good album as well. Give me some good times. Dirt, Street Hustles, long, it's about 8 minutes. I Want to Be Black, real good time together. Yeah, it's a good album, really good, well worth seeking out. Again, if you're not really that familiar with Lou Reed's catalog, I think there is Transformer, Berlin, Street Hustle, and New York are the albums to go for, in my judgment. Okay, number 16. Like I said earlier, I was a young guy in my nightclub years. We're just kicking off, and this was pivotal. This was a great album, C'est Chic by Chic. This has some of their classics on it. And, I mentioned One Nation Under a Groove by Funkadelic, and it's a great album, but Bootsy Collins on bass guitar, at least in part. And you would think it had fantastic rhythm, but actually, this is great bass guitar. Fantastic. And Tony Thompson on drums as well. Bernard Edwards on bass guitar. And Nile Rodgers on guitar. What have we got here? Le Freak, Dance, 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 Everybody Dance, I Want Your Love, and the ballad At Last I'm Free. Really, really a good album. Sounds great in a nightclub. Right, number 15. And this is, and then there were three by Genesis. The Start of a Decline. So there you go. Nice album. This is a reissue. I've got about 3 copies of this one. This is Knebworth. This was Knebworth, June 1978. And I'll always remember that we went down from the northeast to Hertfordshire, which is North London, Northeast London, if you're not familiar with the geography of the UK. And this is the second or third Knebworth Festival, I think it was. And we went down camping for the week. And I remember I was so young and naive at the time. I went without a sleeping bag. I just took a bivy bag, so I'm sleeping in a tent in a plastic bag for about 3 or 4 nights, freezing my ass off. It was just terrible. But anyway, we're bored as well. We were drinking in the pub, and then I um, I remember on the Friday before the Saturday festival, we went down to the arena to do a bit of a recce, and Knebworth is an old stately home. and it's got like a bowl field, which is at the bottom of the bowl is the stage, and the fence all around, of course. And you're walking across these grounds, and they've got mature oak trees. And actually, I remember it was a grey day, but it was dry. And we're walking up towards the to the arena, and all we could hear, just coming out of the air, was the opening melodies of 11th Earl of Mar, which is the opening track on Wind and Wuthering, the great synthesizer opening. And we ran into the arena, and the band were rehearsing or doing sound check. They were rehearsing or something. So we ran down near the front of the stage and managed to watch the band, and we they did a video recording of a track called Many Too Many from this album that was broadcast later. They did two run throughs, miming, of course, with Phil on vocals on one version, and then him behind the drum kit to do the cutaways as well. And then they came down the front to the front into the arena. And these days we'd get a selfie, but I'd met the band, had that autograph, so I wasn't that bothered. It was just amazing, just hanging out. And we managed to get backstage. And there was they did this. They released this thing. Just hang on a second. Oh, let me just get this. Oh, they did this. They released this box set. Was it last year? 2023? 2023, yeah, they released this box set, which is BBC broadcast, because they broadcast an hour's worth of the Genesis show from this concert. And on the back of this box set, 5 CD box set, there's a picture of them like that in these like bomber jackets, and we were right there. And I took some overexposed photographs of the same scene, so I'll put those over this video so you can see what those look like. But yeah, really memorable time. But as I say, at the start of the decline, Steve Hackett had left the band. Mike Rutherford was picking up the lead guitar as well as the bass guitar duties on this album, and you could just tell that he wasn't an accomplished electric guitar lead guitar player, and it really missed Hackett's tone, his creativity, and the songs were shorter as well. And it was, as I say, it was the beginning of the commercial years. Although they came back with Duke a couple of years later, which was a bit of a return to form, although a temporary one. Right, number 14, Cheating Here, Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy. Saw them around this time. I think I saw them in '77, in fact. And this is included, even though it's a live album, because I think they did a lot of cleaning up in the studio. But yeah, good live band. No real surprises other than the fact they didn't do Whiskey in the Jar. I think they weren't doing that at this particular stage. Phil Lynott, what a fantastic frontman, and it comes across in spades on this brilliant live album. All right, okay, number 13. This is somebody I was to see in the following year, 1979, at Sunderland Empire, touring this and the first album, and this is Kate Bush and Lionheart. I've got a soft spot for this album. It's a little bit more, it's no surprise, it's more mature than the Kick Inside, which is her debut album, of course. And it's not that experimental, it's just nice songs. Kind of a little bit kind of laid back, lush sounding, in fact. But it's great. I mean, as a live show, I have to say, it was more about theatre than music, but with all this dance moves and kind of ballet style things going on stage. But yeah, this is a fine album. Not considered one of her best, but to me it was important. Right, number 12. My first Tom Waits album, Blue Valentine. Yeah, wonderful. And opens up with a version of Somewhere from West Side Story. Just tremendous album. It's blues and jazz, everything you would expect from Tom Waits, but it gone past his crooning years of those early singer-songwriter stylings that he had on those very early albums. But it was before Swordfish Trombones, where his musical style, his rhythm, and his voice changed again. But the voice is getting towards that on this particular album. But this is tremendous. Really great album. One of my top three Tom Waits albums. Um, Red Shoes by the Drugstore, Christmas Card from a Hooker in Minneapolis, Romeo is Bleeding. Um, yeah, Blue Valentines. Yeah. So yeah, good album. Tom Waits, Blue Valentine. Right, number 11, the debut album from you know who, Van Halen, David Lee Roth. Hard to, I couldn't exclude this album, even though they're not one of my favorite bands. Just hard rock metal is not my thing. Although I dip into it occasionally. But this has got In Talking About Love, which is amazing. You Really Got Me. Not really that it's good, but I think, oh my goodness. Um, yeah, they updated the King's version. I found it really difficult actually after hearing the riffage on "You Really Got Me." Hard to go back to the original King's version. It sounds really limp. Running with the Devil, of course, which I remember buying the single. Atomic Punk, Eruption. That solo guitar piece from Eddie Van Halen. But yeah, fine album, fine album. Right, number 10, top 10 albums of 1978. You're Gonna Get It by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Not as loaded as the first album because this one doesn't have American Girl on it, but this has got Listen to Her Heart, I Need to Know. The title track is great. Hurt. Uh, yeah, it's Baby's a Rock and Roller. Yeah, great album. Tom Petty, as I say, I saw him at the only time I saw him at the Knebworth Festival, and in a big outdoor gig, top hat and everything. He was absolutely superb. Really, really good performance. Something different. Number 9 was Renaissance and a song for all seasons. Um, Slightly more commercial sound. They had a single from this album called Northern Lights that charted, but there's still plenty of kind of prog stylings in here. It's produced by David Henschel, who produced Genesis and Trick of the Tail, Wind and Wuthering. Um, so it sounds really good as well. But this is a very, very good album as well. So if you, once again, it's a lot of critics kind of can't get past those first few albums of these artists. They just think, well, if it's not Ashes Are Burning and it's all Mother Russia and all that sort of stuff, this this album, even though the tracks are generally shorter than those early albums, it's still a great album. So that's Renaissance and a song for all seasons. Um, Number 8, as I mentioned earlier, Give 'Em Enough Rope by the fantastic Clash, one of the best live bands I ever saw. And this first time I saw them, as I say, it was at Newcastle Polytechnic. This album was kind of dismissed at the time because it had rock stylings, because I think it had Sandy Pearlman produced it. And Pearlman had been, yeah, Sandy Pearlman, and he'd produced Blue Oyster Cult. And this was kind of dismissed as sounds too Americanized. But actually, when you go back to it years later, this sounds just great. Different from the first debut album, but this is still a great album. Give 'Em Enough Rope. Right, number 7. Had to include this one, didn't I? Easter by Patti Smith. Why is this one good? Well, it's got Because the Night on it, of course. But the first side, Till Victory, Space Monkey, Because the Night, Ghost Dance, Babalog, Rock and Roll Nigger, and then Privilege Set Me Free opens up side 2, We Three, 25th. What a great album. Produced by Jimmy Iovine. Yeah, Easter by Patti Smith Group. And right, so top 6. All Mod Cons by The Jam. Down in the Tube Station at Midnight closes this superb album. So their first 2 albums were pretty kind of thin sounding, but still great, no doubt about it. But the energy of this band was fantastic. So yeah, this album, what have we got? All Mod Cons, Mr. Clean, the King's David Watts is on here, Billy Hunt, A-Bomb and Wardour Street, and then of course Down in the Tube Station. Yeah, that's superb. The Jam and All Mod Cons. Number 5, the top 5 albums of 1978, according to me. Number 5, Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, Hearts of Stone. Everything, this I think was the 3rd or 4th album, and it's like everything had come together. They had soul stylings on the first early albums. Everything was written by Steven Van Zandt and Bruce Springsteen. But this album kicks ass. It's just super tight from beginning to end. It's a superb album. 5-star album without question. 5-star album. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful album. That's number 5, Southside Johnny. Number 4 is Some Girls by the Rolling Stones. What did I like about this album? Well, Miss You, respectable. Um, Some Girls itself is superb and funny. Um, Faraway Eyes, Shattered, When the Whip Comes Out. Yeah, great album from beginning to end. And that's the Rolling Stones and Some Girls. All right, top 3 albums of 1978. Number 3, Outlanders d'Amour by the Police, the debut album by the Police. Punky. They're real carpetbaggers. They just jumped on this punk bandwagon. We all know the history of the Police, but there's no denying the songwriting of Sting, even here, and it's aggressive and it's in your face, and it's funny in places. They were great, great live band as well. But You're Next to You, So Lonely, Roxanne, Whole of My Life, Peanuts, Can't Stand Losing You. Born in the 50s sounds like a regular rock song, the only one on here. But yeah, fantastic debut album by a great, great band, and that's the Police. The second best album of 1978 is the debut album by Dire Straits. I remember late 70s, some people were pretty reluctant to lend albums to others because the turntables weren't very good or they didn't look after them. And there was one guy who I used to work with. He said, "You've got to see, you've got to hear this band, this Dire Straits new band. This album's just come out." And he just kept going on about it. I said, "Well, can I borrow it so I can tape it?" And he says, "Well, look, if you're really, really careful." And of course, I borrowed it, and the rest is history. Wonderful, wonderful album. And another band I saw at Newcastle Polytechnic or Newcastle University. And those days in the UK, if bands were playing on the circuit of the universities um, and the polytechnics, which they don't do now, because each of these cities have got their own kind of nightclub style venue. You couldn't get in as a member of the public unless you were a student. So you'd have to kind of schmooze and cozy up to some students. Say, "Could you sign me in as a guest?" sort of thing. And that's when I got access to the Clash that way, and I got access to see Dire Straits that way as well. But this classic album, if you don't already know it, Where Have You Been? Everybody knows that album. And the number 1 album of 1978, no surprise for followers of this channel, Darkness on the Edge of Town. It's a bit overplayed now by me, but this is a fantastic album. This is like, it's overwrought, there's no doubt about it. He just goes over the top. His vocals on Streets of Fire is just like, oh my God, Bruce, just lay off a little bit. But you cannot ignore the tracks on this album. Badlands, Adam Raised a Cane, Something in the Night, Racing in the Street, Candy's Room, The Promised Land, Prove It All Night, Factory. What a fantastic album. Yeah, brilliant. And that's my number 1 album, the best album of 1978. Thanks for making it this far. I will eventually get around to doing 1979, and I'm committed to do right up to the present day. So I will do a video on 2023 at some point. Might take me another 20 or 30 years to get there, but we'll see. I'll do my best. Anyway, thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you on the next video. Ta-ra for now.